a Husker fan podcast, so let's talk about Husker football and put on our scarlet-colored glasses and talk about Husker football and everything that it entails. And Honky, I think you want to dive into this conversation about fandom and what it means, not just for Nebraska fans, but college football fans in general. Do you want me to bring up that first tweet?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead and do that. So it was something that we've been thinking about, and we plan to dive in tonight. Two things can be true at one time. It's possible to criticize Nebraska and still be a great fan. Absolutely. In fact, I know we get called Kool-Aid, and maybe that's because we have Rob on the show, but I think that we criticize and we are constructive in our criticism all the time on this show. We talk about things that we need to do better and things we didn't do well. But so it's possible that you can criticize Nebraska and still be a great fan. It's also possible, number two, to be constructive, not destructive with that criticism. And we've had some questions from people on, well, how do you define what is constructive and not destructive? We can get into that. I don't think it's that hard to figure out the difference, to be quite honest with you, but we can certainly have that discussion. But the point is that what you start to see, if you've been on Twitter at all, and for those that aren't, congratulations, you have better mental health than the rest of us. But there's times where, what is too much? And so we've got a kind of a collection of tweets here that we've taken from the last couple of days. Dr. Rob Zaska, who was on the show a few weeks ago. I love UNL and Nebraska football, but I agree as well. Being critical is different from hating. Like most normal people, I hate Iowa. Got to appreciate that. Dr. Kool-Aid MD, the corrupt donkey on Twitter. And again, if you're not on Twitter, you're like, what's the donkey? No, there's a Husker donkey out there. And he goes, many in this fan base are letting some character traits shine through. I'm actually shocked to see some of the things I've seen. You do you, but I'm not participating in that toxicity. I'll be at the game next Saturday having fun and cheering on my guys. Go Big Red forever. Sarah, she goes, if you're going to start booing Nebraska at Memorial Stadium, just stay home. That got a lot of traction. That tweet did there in Nebraska. We can talk about this, discuss this. There were some boos that happened at halftime. Also, Tony Hayek, can we also remember that we don't boo the other team? I was so embarrassed when North Dakota came out and some of our fans started booing them. That's not who we are, Husker Nation. And last but not least, Lindsay Yu says it's hard to watch/see, honestly. And that's the fan toxicity she means. And the donkey responded, fans believe they're entitled to certain results because they bought tickets and own red shirts. When things aren't going well, their true identity comes out, always will be this way. So that kind of just sets the table. Let's set the discussion of like what should a fan do and what shouldn't they do. I also want to be very clear that Nebraska, I don't think is necessarily any different than any other fan base. We get the same idiots on message boards that are writing whatever they want. We get the same people that say things at games that, I took Alex with me to a game and this for about a quarter and a half. And every section has it. And you have a guy, somebody behind you shouting something. And a lot of times it's the same thing, quite honestly, that I'm actually thinking in my head, just to be very clear. I'm like, oh yeah, that guy's not, what he's saying isn't necessarily wrong, but it shouldn't be said. It shouldn't be said out loud, or that word that shot out. And there's Alex, 10 years old sitting next to me. I'm like, does it have to be like that? Part of this is how would you define, and this is going to be different from person to person, but how do you define what is a good fan or what is something you should do or shouldn't do? We have quite a few people that are following along right now. We'd love to get your comments and get some of that kind of incorporated into this, but maybe let's start around the room. And Dave, I'll start with you. What do you think? What is the role of the fan, and when do things get a little bit too far, or what is allowed, what's not allowed?
That's very philosophical of you, Honky. Mm-hmm. I don't know what
this is a very philosophical discussion here.
What is the role of a fan? Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if I really think of it in those terms. I mean, I totally get some of the comments that are saying, we shouldn't boo, etc. Booing North Dakota, I didn't realize we did that. So that would never be appropriate, especially if it's the beginning of the game. In my opinion.
When they came out, there was some boos, and it was a little.
Look, there's been boos in Memorial Stadium for a long time. I'm sure Boomer can find articles from 1924 when there was boos out there, I suppose. But even I remember Osborne, taking the microphone and shaming the fans and whatnot back in the day for various different things. And I mean, he typically when he got booed, it was him or the team in general. I don't know if any of the boos on Saturday at halftime were directed at any one player. I don't think so. I think it was just generally they were disappointed with the performance, and that's where you can say like fans can express disappointment in not seeing good football, right? I mean, I think as Nebraska fans in particular, that's all we're really looking for, is that a team's well prepared, ready to play, and is giving it all, right? And sometimes you feel like you didn't see that, and that's pretty frustrating as a fan, right? So I get the good decorum that we should take in most instances, but there's also a level where, look, I mean, it's not about paying for tickets or all that type of stuff, or I'm alumni. It's just like, look, the reason that you're playing there and it has a scholarship and the coaches get $5 million a year is because the fans show up, right? And the fans watch on TV. Without us, it doesn't happen whatsoever. And I don't think that entitles you to everything, but at least watching good football is a part of it, right? So if you haven't felt like you've seen that, you can probably lay a little bit into them.
Well, here's some audio I want to play, and this is from What's the Word on 93.7 The Ticket. And this was Chancellor Brewington, friend of the Redcast. He was on a lunchcast with Rob over the offseason. And he specifically, he mentions the booing that happened at halftime. So this is, at least we're getting the perspective here of a player.
Y'all popped out, though. Y'all did boo us, though, and that really hurt. No, that was because the only thing that fans have to understand is I can get if you're frustrated with with whatever, but the players have to hear that going into the locker room, and for some guys, that's their first college football game in Memorial Stadium, and you getting booed, like it's just not a good feeling. Yeah. But we bounce back. Like you shouldn't have to battle adversity from your own fans. You know what I'm saying? Like
keep the booing on Memorial.
They go on a little bit longer, but I like that. You shouldn't have to battle adversity from your own fans. This gets back to literally my question. Like, what is the role of a fan? I want to show something that we posted last week here. And this is just in general, whether you're a fan or not. Saw this sign at Redcast Junior School during orientation a few weeks back. Thought there might be a few keyboard warriors who could benefit from this advice too. Before you speak, think. T, is it true? H, is it helpful? I, is it inspiring? N, is it necessary? K, is it kind? We have a tweet that we also want to show from the tweets of the week. And this is something that we talked about last week, and it ended up being fake. We thought we vetted it. I had heard it on some other news shows or actual radio shows, but it was a quote that supposedly Pat Fitzgerald made, but it wasn't. It's a fake, right? And we didn't do our job. We didn't vet that well enough as a Redcast. I take that on me. It goes right back to the T and think. Is it true? And there are things that we say and things that we show on this show that people would assume, if we're talking about it, that we actually have some idea of what we're talking about and that it was actually factual. And they turn around and they go to work the next day and say, hey, Pat Fitzgerald said this thing. And if he didn't, then we're guilty of pushing something that's not true. The reason I posted this tweet a week ago was in response to a very well-known recruit here in Lincoln who his parents, who are great people, went out in support of him on Twitter because he was getting kind of attacked basically on social media media boards for incorrect stuff. And we get into this discussion. Are they kids? Are they young men? Now they're getting NIL and money. So does that make it okay to do? And these parents are just like, look, I mean, imagine it's your kid with people that have no idea what they're talking about, attacking your kid on social media and on message boards. And that's not right either. I mean, and so whereas fans, there becomes a point, I feel like as a Redcast, the reason I wanted us to have this discussion is that at least we can be a little bit of a voice of the fans too. And we've always tried to be the voice of some reason. And it's like, look, I'm frustrated when we're not doing well. You guys, I was texting with you guys in the first half and I was sitting there saying, look, guys, we need to be running the ball. And I'm attacking what we're doing or not doing, things I want to see, but that's a whole different level than, we've seen on social media, individual players getting attacked and things. And that just, is that helpful? That's the thing. If you're a fan, I go back to this thing here. H, is it helpful? Is the role of the fan to be so vocal that you turn off recruits from wanting to come here, that you make players potentially think of going somewhere else? In transfer, that's my part of my question, and I'm doing a lot of talking. I've got some other thoughts, but I kind of want to let you guys, someone else, fill in for a second.
Let me just mention one thing, and maybe I'll throw it over to Boomer or Rob. Is like back to Brewington's comments about the booing at the end of the half. Is that I totally understand where he's coming from there, and I appreciate that. And to your point, Honky, about the message boards and all that type of stuff, that's what's changed over the 20 years, right? Mm-hmm. 25 years ago when we were in college, you didn't have all that type of stuff. A lot of the message boards when they first kind of launched, there's almost like the dark web, right? It's like it wasn't common Husker stuff. It was like a bunch of really fans that are really into it, and they're talking about stuff, and they never thought that a parent of a recruit would be reading that, and a lot of people haven't changed their attitudes of how those message boards works. And I've never been on them. I don't read them. I don't care about them. I don't like any of the personal stuff at all anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But I guess to my point about like it was it okay or not to boo Memorial Stadium, is that I think I totally understand where Chancellor Brewington's coming from here, but also I think the players should have an understanding of that. You have a fan base that actually knows a lot about football, and they know that you should be up on North Dakota at halftime just playing good, clean, solid football, and they weren't doing that, right? And so I think there's a relationship between fans and players there where it's like, don't treat us like we're idiots, essentially, and we're going to accept any product out there. Mm-hmm. We want a good product because we think that's how we should be able to perform, every Saturday, right? So there's a balance there. That's all I want to say. Boomer or Rob, I mean, I'm more than happy to have you guys jump in on this. Boom.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to think of any game I've been to. I don't recall ever booing the team per se. I may have occasionally voiced displeasure at like a coaching decision, like maybe deciding to punt when I think we should go for it or something to that effect. Might be something I, may have vocalized, but I don't think I've ever booed the team per se. And it does just kind of raise an interesting point, kind of what the role of the fan is, which is why I'm glad Honky was talking about this. When it comes to Nebraska, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, the fans are so key to what this program is. Because can you imagine any other program fan base putting up with what we have over the last 20 years and still showing up?
Traveling to Dublin like we did?
Dublin, no. Good Lord. I mean, you saw UCLA's game this weekend against Bowling Green, I think it was.
Yeah, 27,000 people.
Yeah, I think we had more people watching our podcast than actually saw that game live. I mean, so there is that. And that kind of, again, and that just kind of goes in what is the role of a fan and what can they do when they are disappointed in something. Their choices, they're either just boo, some of them do, which again, I don't like that, or they just stop showing up. And that's happened in Nebraska in the past. I've been at a lot of games. I almost never leave a game early, and at times when it's gotten darker, there's been a lot of times when fans just left. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we all remember that in the Callahan years, the Riley era. There's been a lot of times when that stadium was pretty empty by halftime.
That's one way that fans speak, right? They speak with their money. They speak with that you put the paper bag on your head. You just don't show up. Part of this discussion, the first part, that was it's possible to be critical too. So I want to make sure I'm not. Here's one thing too: is when we come off and we attack the people that are frustrated, and you can't say that about. Well, no, you can say some things. In fact, I want to play this little video that we had from Steve Sipple when he was on about a month ago, when he talked about Ron Brown, longtime Husker assistant. Now he's an analyst. Minute-long video here of him talking about what Ron Brown says about Husker fans.
But Ron Brown, of all people, a few years ago said something that stuck with me about the way things have gone here, and that he was very adamant that the fans have a right to voice their disapproval. You guys are invested. You're heavily invested in this, and that does give you a right to voice disapproval. Mm-hmm. And I sometimes have to remind myself. Sometimes I'm a little taken aback by the level of vitriol. I am. I guess, like I said, I'm kind of a snowflake in some ways, and I think this stuff is fun. But I got to remind myself of what Ron said. There's nothing wrong with voicing disapproval. There's been a lot to voice, so that. But I would say my part in the shot is that, but also I think they're doing a good job. over there. I think we'll see what happens. Again, it's got to be a lot of, you're going to have to win close games. We'll see where that goes.
You know, the idea that fans have a right, we have ownership over this program. I want to take this in a little different direction, and I'm going to show this tweet. And this was from KETV about a week ago, and it was just some article they had or some story on cash bonuses offered to UNL athletes for passing classes. This gets into, and we talked about this 3 years ago when all the NIL stuff was even starting to be discussed. It's like, how does that start to change the narrative in the discussion here? For the longest time, you can't say this about kids. Well, geez, are they kids? They're getting paid to have good grades. They're getting paid for NIL. They're getting paid for all this. Is now, does that make them? Does that give you more right to do something? Or is what Chancellor said, some of these guys, this is their first game at Memorial Stadium, you know, and you shouldn't have to fight adversity from your own fans, or should you have to? Rob, you're raising your hand there.
Yeah, man. I have been fans of some terrible teams for my entire life. All right. And
by choice, Rob.
And yeah. And I mean, and let me just say this, Dave, without the interruption, please. The Raiders, the Warriors, the A's, the Sharks, Nebraska football. Now, I have been watching some terrible sports for the last 30 years combined with all those teams before the Warriors were winning championships. I saw the A's win a World Series in '89, and I've seen them field some of the worst teams in baseball over the years. And I've seen them not win a playoff game. You know what I've never seen at any of those games or heard on television? I've never once heard the fan bases boo those teams. All right. And those are professional athletes. Those are guys getting paid millions of dollars. But I have never been to a game where I've heard people booing those teams off of the field, regardless of how bad they were. And
I have trouble believing that.
I know, and I can, but
I really do.
Good. You find the video of it. You find the video.
I'm not even going to look.
I'm just saying, I have never heard the teams boo. Actually, on the very last game when the Raiders played in Oakland, the fans there, even though they were angry that the team was leaving to Las Vegas, they still showed up en masse to that game and cheered them every single minute on and off the field, and cheered them when they lost. But again, so booing a team, booing a bunch of college kids isn't an emotional thing, Dave. And
you're comparing apples to oranges there. That was an end of season scenario where they're leaving the town. They came out to
my point is even in that scenario, they weren't booing that they were leaving. Fans were angry that they were leaving, Dave. It was, I mean, you're not on those message boards, you're not on their Twitter, you're not following how angry people were.
I get that.
And my point is it's not okay. It's you go to these games, you do that. These are kids. I don't care if they're getting paid or not. They're 18 to 22, 23 years old. Right. They're out there doing the best they can. They're also going to school, trying to get an education, whether they're being paid or not. You know what? Do some of these other students want me to show up at Chipotle when they're working on the weekends for their part-time job and my burrito isn't right? Am I going to walk in and start booing them?
If you got bad customer service, you might complain.
I might go in and but that's more constructive than walking in and booing them while they're at their job behind the counter.
I think what Sipple is talking about when he's talking with Ron Brown there, and the idea of booing is that 78,000 or 85,000 can't walk in and give their individual complaints like you can at Chipotle, but what they can do is they can boo. Now the question still falls back on should they, or when should you be able to? I mean, looking back on it, this team is a young team and they're getting it turned around. We're going to talk about that a little bit later with scoring explosion and throwing the bones. Is that, this team needs support right now. And one of the things that bothers me a little bit with some of the things I've seen is, and you saw it a week ago with Urban Meyer is going to be our next head coach, Dave. Did you hear that? And there's people rooting for this stuff almost already. And I'm like, we're one game into the season and people are already rooting for this thing to be over and move. Some people, let me be very clear. Some are rooting for that almost like it's, I want this thing to end. And I'm sitting here going, I'm battling every week as a fan right now is I want us to get better and I want us to win this next week's game. And then let's have a huge, turnout with Oklahoma coming here and let's win more games. And so as a fan, how do we help? What is our role to help, try to promote that? I also want to show this real quick. And this is, again, I want to be very clear that, being critical isn't something that's anti-Nebraska. Back in 2005, Scott Frost had a blog that he did Scott's Thoughts by Scott Frost, and it was a long blog. It was written after the 2005 loss to Kansas, our first loss to Kansas since 1968. At that point, we were 5-4 in the season. It was the second year of Callahan. The first year of Callahan, they had a losing record, the first losing record since pre-Devaney, 1961. So we're 5-4 coming off of a losing season, and we just lost to Kansas. We went on, after this blog was written, we went on to win the last 2 games, K-State and Colorado, made it to the Alamo Bowl, beat Michigan, ended up 8-4. There was a lot of things that Frost was critical about. I think constructive criticism in a lot of ways. But I want to read this thing. It's 4 paragraphs, but just let me read it here. He goes, building on this point, I'd like to add this. It's not fair to be calling for the firing of any of our coaches right now. Everyone's entitled to their opinions about how the things are going on the field, but we owe these guys a fair chance to get things turned around. If I was a coach that took over a program like Nebraska, I would feel like I deserved at least 3 or 4 years to fully integrate my philosophies and tactics as a coach and leader. Granted, there probably needs to be signs of improvement along the way, but it's not fair to be talking about a change right now. It also doesn't make sense to be firing so many arrows at the staff in the middle of the season. These guys have a job to do, and the fewer distractions they have, the better they will perform. On top of that, we don't want the players feeling like they're in the midst of a firestorm. We don't want them worried that they might have a new coach in a year or 2 or 3. I've heard rumors that some of our vaunted freshmen are kicking around the idea of transferring. We can't lose these kids. Whoever is coaching needs talented players. There's a time and a place for everything. If things haven't improved by the end of the 06 season, then maybe people should voice their opinions on who is the right person to lead our program, but not right now. Now is the time that we should be supporting our team and our players so that they understand that they are part of something special. That's Frost after talking about, he was very critical and a lot of it prior to that point. He was very critical of a lot of the changes that were made that had nothing to do with Callahan, that had to do with Steve Peterson and changes of the Nebraska way. But that was his take there as a ex-player and as a fan of what he wanted to see. And right now, there's so many things that are true there. I know as I read that, there's going to be some people that will listen to that, and especially the ones that wanted Frost gone 10 months ago and they still want him gone now. They'll sit there and say, well, he got his 3 or 4 years. I get it. A decision was made last year by Trev to keep Frost. Frost made a lot of changes. We have a lot of new coaches in there. There's a lot of moving parts. We talked earlier about Whipple and Frost and how are they going to get together. Nobody thought that was just going to be a perfect thing on game one. It's going to take a little time. And as fans, I guess the way I'm going to fan, I'm not going to tell anyone else how to do it. That's not my business, and they don't need to listen to me anyways. I'm going to be patient here, as patient as I can publicly. I'll still text you guys during the game and say, damn it, we needed to run the ball. I will always do that until the day I'm dead. But that's different than vocalizing and going online and saying wrong things about players. And if I ever write something that requires a parent of a player to ever have to come out and defend something that I said, then that to me, that's the line of destructive and constructive right away. I mean, that's easy.
I hear you, Honk. And I'm clear. I mean, I think the booing at the end of the half this week, I don't think it was directed at any one player for certain. And in fact, it was probably directed at the coaching staff and Frost in particular, because they went through a process of calling all their timeouts to try to get the ball back and ended up only leaving themselves 13 seconds because they couldn't get off the field. And then, it felt like that was a very fruitless effort there. They could have time managed a lot better. And I think that's where the boos were at. Right. I mean, so, it's all a certain set of degrees there. So
the crazy thing is that the boos and Boomer, I'm kind of curious. I think you've been putting up some of the comments, but I'd love if there's some more comments to put them up there or read some of the ones, but I'm not, honestly, the booing part doesn't necessarily bother me as much as some other things. I mean, the straight up call outs on social media and the just the vitriol that you see on some of the message boards. Booing is, to me, almost a more universal, it seems like every place does it. Maybe Rob, maybe the Oakland fans have been wonderful over the years, and you know what, I take it
back.
Oakland
Raiders fans are known for being wonderful, so yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, whatever. But I do take it back, because after the TV did go off, they did boo Derek Carr walking off the field in Oakland after the game. So I do take that back. So apparently they did. I don't remember seeing that on TV, but I did look it up. But yeah, regardless, screw you and your Raider fan hate, because Broncos
in
are
a
trash.
perfect world, I would prefer we don't boo, right? But to Dave's point too, in a perfect world, I would prefer it's not 7.5, and that we're not, calling time. I get the frustration from fans, I really do. But one thing with that THINK is, what you're doing, is it helpful? That's one. I do think the role of a fan ideally should be to try to help the program out. And if you're doing something that is turning away recruits, that to Chancellor Brewington, it's the reason I wanted to play his audio, is that this is the perspective of a player, and it's just one player. That you could ask another player on the team, and that player maybe is like, I don't care.
Garrett Nelson might have a completely different perspective.
Yes. So I don't play Chancellor Brewington's audio to say that's the end all be all. This is what this one guy thought. No, I mean, he's just one of 150 players, but it is just, as a fan, the think thing I think matters. And or what you're saying, is it true? We went back and retracted something about Pat Fitzgerald. I mean, I don't even care about Pat Fitzgerald, but if I said it wrong last week, and I said a quote that he didn't say apparently, then I didn't say something true. Is it true? Is it helpful? And as a fan, I want to do things, and I want the show to try to do things that is about being helpful to the program. Ideally, I mean, we all want to win. That's the one thing. Realist, optimist, I don't care. I've talked to so many different Husker fans. We all do want the team to win. It's people are just frustrated. And I think to Ron Brown's point there, especially as long as we've been frustrated, for Christ's sakes, I mean, it's amazing we keep showing up to do this in some ways.
That was a question I had. Is it, I mean, again, I'm not saying we should be booing teams at halftime, but is leaving better than that or worse in your guess?
Look at UCLA. They just don't show up.
Yeah, they either don't show up, or like I said, I've been to a lot of games where the fans just gave up at halftime and left. I mean, and that stadium was very empty towards the fourth quarter. God, I remember one game I was against Ohio State. It was cold. We were getting smoked, and I basically was given free rein to wander Memorial Stadium because I was like one of like 6 people left. And the guards stopped caring. They just, you can go wherever you want. It was kind of fun. Is that better or worse? I don't know.
And Boomer, what do you think about the NIL / all the money discussion? Does that change the game? I mean, now are they?
That adds a whole new element to this, especially if we start considering how collectives work and that they're asking fans to contribute to it. So if I, as a fan, am paying money that is going directly to some of these players, I could certainly see some fans then saying, yes, I have a right to voice displeasure at this performance, since I'm essentially paying for it now at this point. So that's a whole new wrinkle to this, and I don't know. Again, I don't boo anybody in particular, but I could see fans taking that approach now, just with NIL and the fact they're paying for it now.
Yeah. The voice. I think that's a good point. That we have the right to voice displeasure. I think we don't have the right to go out and type whatever we want and say whatever we want and make up things about players and threaten players. And my goodness, I don't know if I can find the. I don't think I have the graphic up here anymore. I put so many in there, but one of them was, this isn't just a Nebraska thing. Last night, LSU, after that, there's someone within the department. She wrote a tweet about the players' mental health that really took off. And, there's, again, when you lose games, you get people that are going to be attacking you from all over the place. And there's things that I think you have the right to do as fans, and there's things I don't think you have the right to do. And if I really have to explain the difference between that, that's probably more on the other person. I'm not going to go that deep.
Is booing opponents okay?
Well, is booing refs okay? I mean, I've booed
I boo refs all the time.
Right?
I'm going to go off on the Illinois refs here, and once we get to that. So,
well, I mean, you can boo toilet water all you want. I mean, referees are trash.
Well, geez, Rob.
Wow, Rob,
that was really
rough.
Really
rough. But
hey, man, after some of those calls this weekend, I mean, seriously, with replay, some of those calls, like, give me a break.
Okay, let's not go down that road again, Rob. That's a long one. We've got a long show ahead of us because we have not even talked about our offense or defense or the betcast. And
thank God you guys did a rapid reaction.
So this was. Thank you, Dave, by the way, for letting me kind of do this discussion, because it was something I wanted to get out there. And I don't know that we've come to any grand conclusions, but in general, I just say I'd like what the fan base is, when Nebraska's at its best, just across the board. The fans are such an active role, and that's in win or loss. I mean, I think of the losses like Ricky Williams, ending our 40-some game home win streak in 1998, and the Husker fans clap him off.
Merrill Hodge,
it. Yeah, Merrill Hodge, after the BYU first game of the Riley era, Merrill Hodge has a son on the BYU team, and that's an opportunity for fans to be at their worst. That we get beat by a Hail Mary, and he goes on to ESPN afterwards and just says the most amazing fans I've ever been around, the most amazing place. And I mean, I still get chills every time, even in losses. I get chills when I know that people say that about us. That's still something that I just think is amazing, and I hate to lose that.
I will close on that, Honky. The point is, because we recognize, Nebraska fans, in my opinion, will recognize good football wherever we're at, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ricky Williams running wild on us, he was a great individual performance. I will clap my hands to that anytime. The BYU game, look, they beat us fair and square. That Hail Mary is a part of the game, and they pulled it off, right? That's not bad football I watched out there, right? I'm going to clap for that, right? You just give me bad football, and then that's a whole different story, right? And I think
Bobby Bowden till the end, he talked about how great Nebraska fans were, and he kept quoting when they beat us like in '81, how they got clapped off the field. And Abby's point there, and I've heard Abby say that before too, that we're great fans to other teams. We are great fans to other teams. That is something we are. We are great fans to Nebraska too. I mean, we show up and we cheer, and we send tens of thousands of people to Dublin, and man, we were great fans to Nebraska in 2019 out in Boulder. All of us, man, we were great fans. And I understand the frustration of fans that you make that one more trip. Or how many times, Dave, have we said, okay, I'm just not going to go on this game. I'm not going to do this one because I'm the reason we're losing. It's obviously
I've not seen an away victory since '95.
So we take it upon ourselves. I'm just not going to show up now because every time I show up we lose. So it's probably my fault, And no, I'm not going to buy into that. I'm going to keep showing up, and with that hope that and there's a lot of great fans. We have so many great fans, and a lot of times it's the loudest voice that is the negative one, right? And but it's that loudest voice. And maybe I think a little bit to Abby's point and to some of the other people that I've interacted with, sometimes maybe the point of reason has to be a loud voice too. A lot of times we just sit back. I'm guilty of this. We sit back and we just let it happen. And no, we're the Redcast. If we want to go out and attack an issue, we can attack an issue too. And we can call people out if they're being beyond obnoxious with it. And generally speaking, 95% of this fan base is just amazing. And sometimes it's those 5% you just got to shake your head at.
Yeah. Fair enough. One last final point too, and that nobody's made, is that we're coming off basically a short week for these kids. They traveled to Europe, played a game, traveled all the way back from Europe, still trying to adjust to the time. Anybody who's traveled over there knows that your clock is never right for at least like a week or so after you get back from a trip or go there. I mean, okay, you're right, Dave. I've only been there 4 times. What do I know?
Everybody's individual time clocks are different, Rob. So
okay, cool. Then thank you for agreeing with my point, is that you've got an entire team of kids that a lot of them had never even left the country before, let alone the state or the state that they lived in until they came to Nebraska. So they go through this entire travel process. They come back. They're expected to practice, play a game, have their entire heads in it. Plus they're starting school, all these other things that are going on. Now we're going to have a whole nother week where they're going to have a chance to practice, where they're going to have a chance to come out there, play a game. They're going to probably be a lot more focused, especially after coming out in that second half and playing a lot better together. So, I mean,
my only question, Rob, is that if they don't do that, they come out and they play a really poor game and they're down by 10.
Then there's no more excuses.
But then is it okay to boo then?
No.
Is that the time that it's okay then?
It's never okay.
We don't need excuses. That's my point.
You don't. It's never okay to boo.
Well, that's Rob's opinion. Not all of us agree with that.